Here we'll talk about strategies for fat loss. So we'll cover topics like what you can do with your workout, your nutrition, a few other habits that can be really important, some possible supplements to consider, and then generating realistic expectations. So when it comes to workouts, strength training should really be the foundation of any training program when you're going for fat loss. And the reason is muscle mass is very important in this whole journey. And if you completely ignore it, you can end up getting yourself into a lot of trouble and really fall in line with what most people currently do is they lose weight, forget about the muscle mass. They end up losing a lot of muscle mass during that journey. Maybe they get to that weight and then they end up bouncing back or even coming back even further than where they started because they're just not paying attention to muscle mass and how that affects your metabolism. And so I'd like to use the example. Let's say you set a goal of losing 20 pounds and you have a particular weight you're trying to hit on the scale. So you start doing cardio, you decrease your calories a bit. You do this for a while and you eventually lose that 20 pounds and you're pretty excited. You hit your goal. But what happens if you're not paying attention to strength training and muscle mass and what's going on there is that maybe out of the 20 pounds that you lost, 8 or 10 or 12 pounds of that could have been muscle mass. And so here you are at the end of that. If you've lost that much muscle, you're not going to be feeling very good or very strong or very athletic. And then your metabolism is going to be in a worse place because you've lost that much muscle. And so you end up in this not so good place, even though you're excited at the time. And then your maintenance calories are so low because your metabolism is going to be slower, again, because you've lost that muscle, that the maintenance calories are so low that it's really hard to sustain that over time. And that's why people end up bouncing back because they end up just eating a little bit more, and then all of a sudden the weight comes back on very quickly. But if you go about this strategically and think about muscle mass, and let's say you lose the 20 pounds, but you lose maybe only 1 or 2 pounds, it does happen. You can lose some, or maybe you maintain, you don't lose any muscle mass during that time. And that way you've lost all that weight from fat, but you're still at a good, healthy metabolism. And so you can muscle helps to create a little bit of this buffer where you can, get away with a little bit more, a few more calories. And it's not really getting away with, you're just setting your baseline a little bit higher so you can have more calories and still maintain a healthy weight over time and also feel good. And when people are trying to look better too with their workouts and their body composition changes, muscle mass plays a really big role. If you don't, you could be at a weight that you like, but with no muscle mass, and you're probably not going to like the way that you look at that point too. And it's not going to be very functional if you're trying to do other activities like go out for bike rides or hikes or things like that. So we recommend really 2 to 3 times per week of strength training. Focus on full body compound movements. That would be things like deadlifts and squats and lunges and push-ups and pull-ups and rows. So if you're coming into bStrong, these are the things you're going to be doing for every workout too. And so I think that's one of the most important concepts overall when somebody's trying to lose fat is for them to understand that muscle mass plays a really big role in that, and not just thinking about weight on a scale, but thinking about where that weight is coming from. And that's why these body composition tests can be really helpful too, so you can keep track of that kind of stuff. And then when it comes to other activity, we're not saying that strength is important and cardio doesn't matter or no other activity matters, but strength really should be the priority. Other activities, cardio can be helpful, and some people love cardio, and it's cool. Then make that a part of your normal training routine. If you absolutely despise cardio, then I think focus more on just your general activity. Are you getting, 10,000 is a good number to keep in mind for steps. So track that. Are you getting around 10,000 steps? Are you getting, 2,000 or 3,000 steps? Just having a general baseline of activity can be really helpful too, as far as just your normal metabolism, how many calories you're burning in a day. It doesn't mean more is better. You don't need to shoot for 30,000 steps a day. But if you're getting somewhere in the 8, 10, or 12,000 step range, you know that you're generally moving around throughout the day. You're probably not just sitting for the entire day. And since a lot of people do have sedentary jobs, you don't have to get up and move around a lot for your work. It's easier to fall into that really low number. So you might need to make a conscious effort to go for a walk every day, or when you're going to the grocery store or running errands, park farther away and just walk for a little bit longer. Like, it's usually you're going to feel better after that anyway, and it's going to help keep you at a good baseline for your activity levels. Now, if there are activities that you enjoy or at least don't hate, focus more on those too for the long term. You're more likely to stick with an activity if it's something that you actually enjoy, or maybe there's somebody else involved, like it's a partner that goes for a walk with you, or a friend, or a dog, or anything like that. Find some activities that will keep you going, and you don't have to like drag yourself to do it every single day, because those are harder to stick to over time. And then a last note is just avoid overtraining. A lot of people, that's not the issue. It's more about how to add enough activity to feel good. But for some people, they just always think that more is better. And so maybe they're already doing 4 or 5 spin classes a week. So they think, well, let me go up to 5 or 6 or 7 spin classes a week because I'm not seeing the results that I want. But that's once you cross kind of that normal threshold of, okay, 2 to 3 days a week of strength training, maybe 1 or 2 days a week of like a jog or a bike ride or something like that, you're in a pretty good place with activity level. Trying to push more and more activity on top of that, first of all, is unrealistic for most people's schedules. And also just for your body, that's going to probably be too much. You're going to want to look at some of the other things like the nutrition and some of the other habits that we'll talk about next. That's where you want to make the adjustments. Don't just keep thinking, I need to add more and more and more in, once you're already at a pretty good baseline that we kind of lay out right here for it. Now, going over nutrition, it's about creating a caloric deficit. We want it to be a small to moderate deficit. If you're trying to go for this huge gap between how much energy you're expending and how much you're taking in, that's going to set you up for failure too, because your body doesn't want to be in that big of a deficit. It's going to resist. It's going to not want to lose the fat as quickly. It can end up breaking down muscle mass more quickly if you do that. And then you're not going to feel very good, because you're not going to feel very recovered after workouts. If you're doing a lot of workouts and you're not eating a lot of calories, you're not going to feel good either. So creating a small deficit is kind of what we're going for here. The number one thing that people usually can benefit from the most when it comes to a fat loss journey is getting their protein into this recommended range. Almost nobody that I talk to comes in this range already. Even if they think they're eating a good amount of protein, oftentimes they're going to be below this. And so our recommended range is in the 0.6 to 1 gram per pound of desired body weight. Now, for a lot of people, if you have, if you're within 5, 10, 15, 20 pounds of what your desired body weight is, you can kind of just use this as 0.6 to 1 grams per pound of body weight. If you have more weight to lose, and let's say somebody weighs 300 pounds and their desired body weight is 200 pounds, then this range is, you want this based off of more of the 200 pounds, not off the 300. That's going to be probably just too much protein for anybody to have. So think about it in that way. Find what your desired body weight is, 0.6 to 1 gram per pound of that. And a lot of people will be well below this. And so don't think that, oh, wow, I'm only at 0.3 or 0.4 grams and I'm trying to get up to 1. That's way too big of a jump. That takes a very long time to get to, and you don't even necessarily need to get that high. But think, let me get up to 0.5 or 0.6. Let me just start getting close to that range or get into that range. And then maybe over time you go up a little bit higher. But set the bar at a reasonable level at first, especially if you're pretty far from this. But this is very helpful. Going back to that discussion about muscle mass that we talked about a few minutes ago, you can be doing strength training and working your butt off with your workouts, but if you're not getting enough protein, you will still lose muscle mass through this journey too. So it's kind of, you need both sides of it. You need to stimulate the muscle growth by doing some strength training, but then you also need to provide it the fuel and the recovery and the resources necessary to maintain and build that muscle mass that we want. Vegetables, I think most people know that's going to be a pretty helpful food category to make a priority. If you're not getting much at all, try adding just a little bit in. We like to shoot for, if you can get up to 5 servings in a day, that's awesome. That's going to be a lot more than most people are getting right now. Maybe you're only getting 1 a day. Let's try to get to 2 for a while. That's a good starting point. But vegetables are going to have a lot of nutrients in them. They also don't have as many calories in them. And so, especially non-starchy vegetables, that would be things like greens and, spinach and onions and peppers and things like that. You can eat a ton of those and you're not going to get a lot of calories there. So it's pretty hard to overeat those. Things like starchy vegetables like potatoes and sweet potatoes, yes, you can go overboard on those. So those, just think more moderation, but still they're going to be better than most alternatives for calorie sources. So lots of vegetables, lots of protein. If you can make those 2 things the priority in most of your meals, you'll be in a good place. Limiting liquid calories. This is another one that is usually a fairly obvious one for people. If you're having an 800 calorie Starbucks drink every single day, that's just a lot of calories without any nutrition, basically. So if you're doing that, whether it's with coffee drinks or with soft drinks or things like that, if you can find some alternatives, some better options that don't have as much sugar or as much fat in there, that can be really powerful. A good place to start for a lot of people if you know that you get a lot of liquid calories. And then just general food quality, simple carbs are going to be more sweets and desserts and things like that. Complex carbs are going to be more of those like starchy vegetables we talked about, potatoes, sweet potatoes, and then other things like oatmeal, whole grains, things like that. Those are going to be better options than those simple carbs. You're less likely to have big swings in your blood sugar. So cravings typically aren't affected as much. And so that's a good place to start when you're looking at carbohydrates. Fiber is going to be really helpful, usually helps keep you full for longer, helps your digestive system, but that's really helpful with fat loss. That's another thing. If you just want to think about one thing to focus on for a period of time, try getting more fiber for a while, and usually you'll see pretty good progress with that. And then fat, just be careful as far as quantity. So quality fat is good, eggs and nuts and seeds and avocados and things like that, all good sources of fat. But just be aware of they come with a lot of calories, and so just make sure you're controlling portion sizes for that. Other habits that are really helpful: sleep, probably even more helpful than workouts and nutrition. So find strategies to help you get better sleep through the night, better quality sleep. Keep your room cool and dark, and try to limit interruptions in electronics and things like that. Stress management and recovery. This goes back a little bit to that overtraining conversation. We want to make sure we're adding some of this in. We don't want to just think about pushing the workouts hard every single day. There needs to be some rest, some recovery, both physically, but then for your nervous system too. Like your body needs to be able to relax once in a while to know that it's not just in this constantly high stress environment. And then mindset and consistency. So expect obstacles. Know that you're not going to get 100% on everything. You're not going to have a perfect meal every meal. You're not going to have a perfect workout every day. Shoot for 80 to 90%. Expect that there's going to be things that come up along the way. I've seen too many people over the years that get off to a really good start, a couple weeks or even a couple months of just really nailing everything. And then one thing that's relatively minor comes up. Maybe they get a cold, or they have a work trip that's unexpected, or they have to go take care of a family member for a period of time. And then all of a sudden, everything just goes out the window. And you just need to know that those things are going to come up from time to time, and we need to manage them. So if it just means you're going really hardcore for a little while, and then you got to pull back a little more towards maintenance, that's fine. But it shouldn't just be this massive swing from going hardcore to just throwing everything out the window. Supplements, whenever we talk about supplements, it's important to talk to your healthcare provider. If you're taking certain medications, if you have certain health issues, it's important not to just start taking a bunch of random stuff. But the ones that tend to see good results and tend to have pretty minimal side effects or complications for people. Multivitamin can just help fill in the gaps for some nutrient deficiencies. Fish oil can help controlling inflammation. There's some brain health benefits to that too. Vitamin D, especially if you're in the Northwest or if you're in the Northern Hemisphere during the winter time, a lot of people get pretty low in vitamin D, and that plays a role in a lot of different processes in the body. It's pretty easy to get that tested. You can ask your doctor to add that into a blood test, and it's a good idea to see where you're at with that. Magnesium is something a lot of people are deficient in. It can help with a lot of things, muscle recovery, preventing muscle cramps, things like that. Sleep, it can be helpful for too. So something potentially worth looking into. Electrolytes, especially as you start to improve your diet and you have less and less of the processed food that usually comes with a lot of sodium. Oftentimes we might need to add a little bit of sea salt into some meals, or maybe electrolyte supplements during workouts. If you're somebody who sweats a lot, those can be helpful. So that's an option, of something to consider looking into. Pre-workout, that's another very optional one. I wouldn't start taking it if you don't think you need it at all. But if you are doing morning workouts, or you feel like you just need a little extra pick me up for some of your workouts, that can be something to look into as well. You don't want to do stuff that has a million different ingredients in it and all kinds of crazy stuff, but usually more simple formulas are going to be helpful. That usually there's a little bit of caffeine in those to help just give you some more energy. And then more goal specific, we talked about how important protein intake is and trying to get up into that range. And that's not always realistic to do with just plain food. It's awesome if you can do that, but it's not always realistic for most people. So finding a protein powder that works for you, finding a taste that works for you. If it needs to be, vegan or vegetarian, there are plenty of options out there for that. If whey protein works for you, that's usually a good quality source. But find a flavor, a taste, a texture that works for you, and make sure it doesn't upset your stomach. But that can be really helpful in getting you up into that range for protein intake. And then the last thing there is essential amino acids. That is more that can come into play if you are doing a lot of fasting. If you are doing a morning workout without really eating beforehand, so again, you're kind of in a fasted state for that workout, that the amino acids can be helpful to just help prevent more extra muscle breakdown. If you're kind of on the edge of your protein intake and you're kind of low some days and maybe just hitting it some days, it can be helpful too to get some extra amino acids in to help prevent the muscle breakdown and help you maintain and potentially build some muscle mass during this journey. And then expectations. So this is where a lot of people get off track. They might have all the tools and they have the motivation, but then they shoot for this very aggressive approach, which is usually not the way you want to go. Or they go with a slow approach, but then they expect the results from the very aggressive approach. So in the parentheses, I have like kind of what I would consider like pretty aggressive changes, and that's body fat percentage changes within a month or so. So the very aggressive, it's like, okay, yeah, it's possible to see a maybe 3 to 4% change in body composition in a month, but that's very challenging, and that requires you to really be on point with everything. So like tracking all your food, never missing a workout, not drinking, not having sweets or anything like that, getting sleep every single night, a lot of sleep, good quality sleep. That's hard to do. It's not very realistic for most people, but that's, it is possible. It's just that if you don't set your sights on that type of change, if you're not willing to do all of those things along the way. So what I recommend most often is more of the moderate or the slow approach. Moderate, maybe a 1 to 2% change over the course of a month. That's still going to be really good progress. But it's going to require some moderate changes. So, I mean, getting your protein up to that recommended range could be a challenge. That could take some time to get up to that point. That's a moderate change. Maybe you're currently doing 2 times a week of your strength training, adding another day in. That's a moderate change. I mean, it's doable. You're already doing the workouts. You kind of understand how that works. But adding another day in per week is a decent change. But those, if you're doing those, you can expect to see decent changes too. And then the last approach, which is probably where most people should be shooting for, is more of maybe a 0.5% to 1% change in body fat over the course of a month. Minor changes, let's bump the protein up a little bit, maybe having an extra serving of protein at dinner time. That can put you into a better place. Maybe you're getting 5,000 steps a day, but you're going to bump that up to 7,000 steps because you're going to go for a short walk every day to get there. So most people should be kind of in these bottom 2 options. And another way to think about it is think about like a dial where maybe you start out in this moderate approach where, your schedule's good, you're feeling motivated and you can push things to a decent level. But then something comes up and you've got a busy stretch at work or you've got some relationship stuff going on. And so you need to pull back more to that slow approach, or maybe even just a total maintenance approach. But think about it as a dial that you can turn up and down. And when life's a little bit simpler, you can push a little bit more towards that moderate approach. And when life's getting a little more complicated, more to that slow approach. So having the ability to adapt to those situations and different life changes is really helpful. What most people do, though, is they go right for the aggressive approach. They do it for a couple of weeks, and then something comes up, they fall off, it blows up, and then they go back to zero. And it's much better to take more of that long-term approach, more of that sustainable approach. And so what's next? I would say out of all the things we talked about, like hopefully a few of those things were topics that you thought, okay, I can probably make some improvements on these. Maybe some I can make some really big improvements on these. Find the things that would be maybe most motivating, maybe the simplest to start making those changes. Pick 1 or 2 of those things and then work on those for a period of time. Don't try to find 10 things and do them all at once, because you're going to get distracted and not do very well at any of them. But if you can pick 1 to 2, give them a good effort for a little while. Once they start to feel like their habits, they feel pretty natural, then add the next thing in there and try that for a couple of weeks until that feels more natural. And then you just start stacking these habits, but stack them over a long period of time rather than trying to do it all within a couple week window. So let us know if you have any questions, but thanks for listening.